Hey guys, TheAirsoftTech here, and today we're going to be talking about radiusing and what it does and all the good stuff about it and why you should do it and how to do it. So if you've been in the teching community, whether it's on forums or groups on Facebook or anything of that sort, more than likely you've heard the concept of radiusing and you've wondered probably if you should do it, and from that point you've wondered how to do it. Well, all radiusing is when you take a gearbox shell, specifically normally a version 2 gearbox shell, because other gearbox shells aren't prone to crackage like the version 2 is, and you take the edges or the corners of it, the very corners of the gearbox shell right here, and you turn them into circles instead of corners. That's really how that works. And that gets rid of this step here on the gearbox shell that I'm going to show you in a minute. And what this does is it prevents the shell from cracking as easily. If you understand the mechanics and physics and all that stuff, you'll understand that corners crack, well, fractures occur in corners way more than they do in a circle. Cracks don't very easily form in circles. It takes a lot of stress to actually put a crack in a circle or anything that has an arch to it where it's curved and not very sharp. And that's the problem with version 2 gearbox shells, is that they have that sharp step where there's no reinforcement around it to actually take a blow. So this makes it crack very easily. And the reason why we don't need to do it to version 3 gearbox shells is because it's so reinforced around it. It doesn't need to be radiused. And if you were to radius a version 3 gearbox shell, more than likely you would probably actually weaken it because you would take more material off than what's necessary, therefore actually weakening the gearbox shell. So now let's actually take a look at a gearbox shell close up so we can actually see what we're doing and what's so bad about having the step here. So here we have a stock GMP shell. I've been working on a GMP and I've cleaned it out, I've washed it up, and that's one of the things I do recommend before radiusing is to clean up your shell. Just one thing I do normally. And as you can see here, the corners I was talking about, these steps here, these are a bad thing. And let me see if I can get a better focus on that. But these corners right here are a bad thing. The reason being is what I explained previously, is that a crack can easily form here, especially with no reinforcement around this gearbox shell. Now, even though GMP gearbox shells are some of the stronger gearbox shells on the market as far as stock gearbox shells are concerned, it is always good to radius gearbox shells. A GMP gearbox shell will probably hold up on an M120 to about 30 RPS just fine for quite a long time. However, if you radius it, you could probably run an M150 spring on it on full auto, and I've actually seen people run M190 springs full stroke, full auto on a GMP shell just fine. So it's always good to radius, and that's what we're going to do. But this step here, that real sharp step here, we need to remove. And so we're going to need a couple tools for that. And the same thing applies for up here. There's also a step right here that we need to remove. And obviously on the other side of the gearbox shell as well. We want to radius all sides of the gearbox shell, which is actually 4 sides. Now some people actually radius the rear sides. I personally don't do this because I don't see a point to it. Some people will say that shock reduction is shock reduction, so you might as well do it. However, if there's really no, like, gearbox shells don't break back here, is what I'm saying. So, I mean, they can, but it's very, very rare that they do. And the ones that do are like G&G shells, something that's really weak and just made out of pot metal. Even more pot metal than other stock gearbox shells. But I honestly see no point to radiusing the rear. You can radius the rear if you so desire. It doesn't do anything bad. It just takes more time to get something. So I normally just radius the front, and that's what we're going to do. So in order to radius our gearbox shell, we need a couple tools. Well, you really only need one tool, but I have 2 here that I'm going to show as an example. One tool is you're going to need is a file. A file that you can remove this corner with slowly, nice and evenly. Or you can use a Dremel with a cutting attachment. This is an attachment I use to cut metal with, such as like gearbox shells, and I want to cut a little window to, shim bevel to pin a little easier. Comes this little attachment here. And I stick it on a Dremel, and I use it to radius gearbox shells and cut windows and all that stuff. But the Dremel is way faster. I find this bit much more precise than using a large file. I feel like I sometimes may remove too much material with this, hence why I prefer this little attachment here. But this can work just fine if you don't just get too carried away. Some people, when they radius, they really get carried away and they remove way too much material. And I'm going to show you a gearbox shell that has way too much material removed from it, and then a gearbox shell that has the proper amount of material removed from it. So now, let's go radius our gearbox shell. So if you're going to use a file, you can do it in really any place you want, as long as you have like a paper towel laying down or somewhere you're doing it into a trash can so you don't get metal everywhere and it's difficult to clean up. If you get metal like in your skin, it's not gonna deteriorate like wood would. So you don't want to get metal splinters in your skin. So if you're gonna use a file, just lay down a paper towel or do it in a trash can, and that'll be just fine. Here I have a version 2 gearbox shell, the properly radiused upper window right here. And as you can see, I've just removed the step, and that's all I've done. I haven't done anything else. I just removed the step here. I did this with a file, but just going back and forth or one way, because this is a one-way file. But see, all I've done is remove the step, remove the corner, and that's all I've done. Now I'm going to do this part on camera. This step right here. Right here. Alright. So when you do this, I find it easiest to kind of like let it sit down in one position and then just work your file forward. So that's what I'm going to do. You don't have to push down too hard, just kind of let the file do the work and you just go back and forth. And periodically check your work, make sure you're not removing too much or you haven't removed too much already, and make sure you're moving it correctly in the right spot and that kind of thing. You don't want to sit here and be like filing away for like 30 seconds and then realize you're doing it incorrectly. Okay, and as you can see, I've done the same thing to the bottom part here. And a misconception with radiusing that a lot of people make is that all you're doing is putting a circle in this corner, which couldn't be further from the truth. And it's a misconception, really. It's a thing that people have when they explain radiusing. They just say, you remove the corner. Well, that's kind of, that could be taken two different ways. Somebody could think that they're just removing this corner right here, as seen by this gearbox shell right here, because there's obviously a corner here, and they might be thinking, oh, I'll just take my file to it, go back and forth in this corner, and remove it. Well, that's not necessarily what you do. The corner that people are referring to is the step here. You want to remove that step to where it's just a circle, or part of a circle, a curve, an arc, in other words. And here's that's all we've done right here. And a proper radiusing job such as this one, you can see how it forms this kind of semicircular figure here in the corner here. And yes, you do want to put a little bit of a circle here as well as removing this corner here, because this is a corner, but it's not a step. You want to remove both the step and the corner ever so slightly so that you're not removing too much, but at the same time you're getting it done to where it actually does an effective job. So now, since we've figured out how to use it with a file, let's go over and do it with a Dremel now. Alright, so I've got my Dremel here on the other side of the gearbox shell. Now we're going to radius the other side of the gearbox shell. So I've moved down to my garage where I can make a little bit more of a mess with a Dremel, because the Dremel kind of throws stuff, everywhere more than a file does, as it's not as sporadic as or fast as a Dremel. So got my Dremel outside here on the other side of the gearbox shell in my garage, and we're going to Dremel out to the other corner. Now I have Dremeled the radius, the top portion of this gearbox shell. And I've put a semicircle in it, and I've removed the arch. I mean the corner, which is all I've done. As you can see, I haven't done anything else. I haven't removed any more material than necessary to remove that corner, that step that we want to remove that causes all that stress. And now we're going to do that to the bottom part. I do recommend you wear safety goggles for this, as you don't want metal splinters in your eyes that can really sting, and that is really difficult to get out. It's just better to be safe than sorry and to get metal in your eye. So here we go. I'm going to remove the bottom step here. Now I'm not done yet. I was wanting to tell you guys something. When you work with the Dremel, you want to go back and forth slowly and to not push down too hard. You don't have to push down hard at all for a Dremel to actually do its work. You just kind of need to let it sit there and control it and hold it strong so it doesn't, jerk around and catch on something and tear up other parts of the gearbox shell. All we're doing is radiusing. We don't want to tear up anything else. So let's get back to work. Okay, as you can see, all I've done is remove the corner or the step and remove part of the corner over here to where we just got ourselves a nice semicircle. And with that, our radiusing job is done. I do recommend you take this and you wash it out with a nice, not with nice, but just with some soap and water, or take a brush to it and some water, or you can even take a sweep or a wet dry vac to it or even blow all the metal shards out. You just want to get these shards outside the gearbox shell so that they don't get in your gears, they don't get in your cylinder and scratch it up or anything like that, which could cause PME. So you could have this whole list of problems just by having these shards in here, and you want to make sure you get them out. And definitely wash your hands, just run some water over them and rub them gently to get all the metal off of them. Alright, so now you guys have yourself a properly radiused version 2 gearbox shell that, if it's of good quality, it's going to last a good amount of time. And here's our finished product though. I'm not sure if you can very well see that, but the radiusing job is very neat, very clean, and this is going to be going for a 35 rounds per second build on an M130 spring or an M120, I'm not sure yet. However, this is a very successful radiusing job, and if you guys do it just like that, it's going to be just fine. However, radiusing does not make a gearbox shell invincible, and this is basically the end of the guide. But if you guys want to stay and watch something else, I got a couple gearbox shells that have broken even though they were radiused, or broken without a radius, that I'm kind of wanting to show you guys. So if you're just here for the guide, this is it. But if you want to stay and watch something else, stay and watch it.